Hi, and welcome to another episode of Virtual Paddock. I hope you had a wonderful Christmas or whatever holidays you celebrate. This episode is going to be focused mostly on sim racing, though I will also do one race report for the Formula E Ad Diriyah ePrix recently. The news this time will just be a quick rundown of what's been happening. And since it's the end of the year, I'm gonna do a personal review of how 2018 went for me as a sim racer. Plus, I've got a pretty cool announcement at the end of the episode. So, let's go. Starting with Formula E this time, it was the Ad Diriyah ePrix on the 15th of December. First race of Season 5 with the new Generation 2 cars, which not only are much faster than the previous ones, but also they last a full race distance now, which by the way isn't a set number of laps anymore, but 45 minutes plus one lap. First posted of Season 5 was Antonio Felix da Costa, who after the formation lap immediately overshot his grid slot and he had to reverse back in. Then during the first lap, Eduardo Mortara went into the barriers once, and he could reverse and continue. And the graphics showed a full course yellow, even though race control had not actually given a focus yellow. Then about 5 minutes in, the attack mode zone was opened. And for this race, every driver had to use attack mode twice, and the boost lasted for 4 minutes. The first drivers to use it were Oliver Turvey and Tom Dillman, who at that time were P20 and 21, whereas a lot of the frontrunners only started using it very late. With about 18.5 minutes to go, Andre Lotterer was the first one within the top 6 to make use of it. There had been a lead change in the meantime when Verne got past Da Costa, but Verne ended up getting a drive-through penalty soon after because of a technical infringement. Now what happened was that under braking, during regeneration, the peak power had exceeded the maximum output allowed. And several other drivers also got drive-through penalties for the same reason. But Da Costa was not among them, so he ended up getting the lead back. Then a while later, with around 11 minutes left, there was a full course yellow, which this time had actually been given by race control, after Jose Maria Lopez had stopped with damage to his left rear suspension, and the safety car actually ended up coming out. And during the safety car phase, all the drivers who still had attack mode left drove through the activation zone once, so they'd have the boost when the safety car went back in, which happened with about 4 minutes to go. Verne then was able to get back to P2 after his penalty, but it was Antonio Felix da Costa who ended up winning the race. And joining those two on the podium was Jerome D'Ambrosio. Enough of the news, just a quick rundown this time. The FIA has published the official regulations for the LMP1 hypercar class from 2020 onwards. There'll still be hybrids, and the ICE will be limited in power to 508 kilowatts, and the electric motor to 200 kilowatts. They'll also introduce budget caps and cost caps. The budget will be limited to 20 million euros a season for a 2-car team. And teams that do not manufacture an energy recovery system can rent one from a manufacturer for a total of 3 million euros, that also being the price for a full season with 2 cars. The DMSB Sim Racing working group has now been established. The chairman of the group is Jan Seyffarth, who's a racing driver and an avid sim racer. But the best known member is probably Frank Biela, who's a 5-time Le Mans winner with Audi. A list of all the members is in the description. The first main goals of the group are improving structures in sim racing, potentially also establishing something like official German national sim racing championships, and also just trying to help the popularity of sim racing. McLaren have announced their engine partner for the 2019 Indy 500. Alonso's participation in the 2019 edition of the Indy 500 had already been announced during the Formula 1 Brazilian Grand Prix weekend this year. He'll compete there with McLaren. And recently they announced that they'll be using Chevrolet engines. Fanatec have presented their first wheels for their direct drive podium series. The first one is the Club Sport steering wheel F1 PS4, which together with the DD1 PS4 wheelbase is the first ever direct drive system to be licensed for PlayStation 4. And shortly after that they presented the Club Sport steering wheel Formula V2, which essentially is very similar but compatible with the Xbox One. Several updates to a lot of the big sim racing titles this month. Started with iRacing introducing day and night transitions in early December, along with some new custom tracks. Assetto Corsa Competizione was updated as well, with the Hungaroring and the Ferrari 488 GT3 now being in the game, along with the possibility of doing full race weekends now. R-Factor 2 got a new GT3 car pack as well. Then Race Room now allows for multi-class racing in single player with an AI selector, plus a new car, the Porsche 934 Turbo RSR, the first car in the Group 4 class in Race Room. And Kartcraft has now introduced a quick race mode for racing against AI with up to 8 AI drivers. Race Sim Studio have released a new Assetto Corsa mod. It's called the Formula RSS 2000 V10, and it's essentially a 2000 spec Formula 1 car. Of course, with a high-revving, naturally aspirated 3-liter V10 engine. And lastly, somewhat of rumor, it looks like McLaren could be coming to Automobilista. Because the most recent update for Automobilista added a new folder named McLaren in the vehicles directory. It's still empty though, and Riser have not made an official announcement yet. Now for a more personal talking point. 2018 was what I would consider my first proper year in sim racing, so I've decided to do a review of the year from a sim racing perspective. I had already tried some of the older games like GTR2 or R-Factor a few years ago, but only with joystick and occasionally with a cheap wheel. But then my interest in sim racing ended up growing more and more, and then for Christmas in 2017 I finally got a proper force feedback wheel, a Logitech G29, and that really kickstarted my passion for sim racing. It seemed to be working best with Race Room at first, which by the way was also the only one of the kind of newest sims that came out in recent years that I could run properly on my old laptop. So I ended up playing Race Room for most of the year. Obviously I was pretty bad and slow at first, though then throughout the year I certainly improved. But it was really a humbling experience at times. And my respect for professional racing drivers is even bigger now than it was previously. For example, one of the first times I tried the Formula Race Room X17, which is basically like a 2017 spec Formula 1 car, but with a 3-liter V10. One of the first times I went through like really quick corner combination with that one. Actually, mentally I couldn't keep up with how fast it was going and I crashed. And to think that professionals do that while under pretty extreme physical loads and thinking about things like race strategy and managing the tires, that's still absolutely astonishing to me. Then in March I tried online multiplayer racing for the first time with Sim Racing System, and it's so fun. I've had some absolutely incredible times. My favorite race so far was in late August or early September. It was a Formula 4 race at Portimao. First time I ever scored a pole position. Though I made a bit of a mistake then in the race, about 2 or 3 laps in. Was down to P3, but then there was some awesome battling in the top 3 and I actually ended up finishing P2. It still makes me smile when I think about that race. Now, being a sim racer obviously includes the hunt for more and more immersion, and I'm no exception to that. One of the first steps I took in that direction was getting a Placey challenge in late June, which not only gave me a more race car-like seating position, but I also enjoyed that some of the force feedback effects could then actually be felt through the frame, and I could feel them in my body and not just in my hands. And another step for improving the immersion was getting the GTI progressive brake spring along with a 3D wrap rubber for the brake pedal of my G29. I got those mods back in September. And I had never really liked the stock G29 brake with that little rubber block at the end. It was actually, the brake was way too light at first, and then it got a very sudden resistance at the end. Whereas with the progressive spring and the 3D wrap rubber, which goes fully into the spring, with them essentially forming one unit, so to speak. With that new combination, the brake pedal is a lot stiffer now and has a really nice progressive feel, which not only is a lot more realistic as far as I know, but also allowed me to develop a much better feeling and sensitivity for braking. And since then I've been getting a lot more comfortable driving cars without ABS and where it's very easy to lock up, like for example the Porsche 911 GT3 Cup car. And then recently I took another very important step, because I finally got a good and up-to-date computer that actually allows me to keep up with the current standards for sim racing and that can run all the sims commonly used these days. Lately I've actually been mostly playing Assetto Corsa and Kartcraft, but I'm enjoying every single one so far. I just don't have iRacing yet though, but I might get eventually when I'm able to afford it. Also, sim racing to some extent has certainly changed the way I look at real-life motorsport, because these days I pay a lot more attention to where drivers brake and their turn-in points and generally the racing lines they take and their inputs. For example, in qualifying for this year's Formula 1 Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, I immediately noticed just how late a lot of the drivers turned in at the hairpin before the long straight, going for an extremely late apex, and I'm not sure if I had noticed that just as clearly if I was not into sim racing. It's been an awesome year for me as a sim racer, really enjoyable. I'm still working on improving every day, trying to get faster and faster, and I hope that will also continue into 2019. I'm really looking forward to the new year. As I said at the beginning of the episode, I still have an announcement to make. Virtual Paddock videos will be coming soon. So the YouTube channel will contain a lot more than just uploads of the podcast. I'll keep doing the podcast as well, of course, though I'm planning to somewhat restructure the episodes a bit. But with the videos I'll have a lot more content coming. It'll probably mostly be sim racing videos at first, but eventually I'll see what else I might be able to do. So, that's it for another episode of Virtual Paddock. Last episode for 2018. I hope you enjoyed it and I wish you all the best for the new year. And until then, use the downforce and see you soon.